It is happening right now in a facility buried beneath 60 meters of reinforced concrete in the Fordo Mountains of north-central Iran. The centrifuges are spinning. They have been spinning for years. But something changed this week. Something that the three-sentence wire reports are not coming close to capturing. Somewhere inside that mountain, according to International Atomic Energy Agency monitoring data reviewed by multiple intelligence services, Iran has crossed a threshold that every Western government, every Gulf monarchy, and every strategic planning document from Washington to Tel Aviv spent the last 2 decades trying to prevent. Not a threat, not a declaration, not a provocation designed for negotiating leverage. A technical fact, the kind that once established cannot be undiplomatically wished away. You can feel it in the oil markets. Brent crude moved $9 in a single trading session. The options market on Israeli defense contractors spiked in a way that veteran traders described as unlike anything they had seen since 2006. In Tehran, state television ran a broadcast that lasted 47 minutes and included footage that had never been shown publicly before. In Washington, the National Security Council convened at 2 MEM, local time. In Riyadh, a call was placed to Beijing. Here is the fact the mainstream coverage has not fully explained. Iran has now enriched uranium to 84% purity, a single percentage point below the 90% threshold formally defined as weapons grade, and has accumulated enough of that material to theoretically construct multiple warheads. The gap between where Iran stands today and a functional nuclear device is no longer measured in years. According to assessments from the Institute for Science and International Security, that gap is now measured in weeks of additional technical work. Not policy decisions, not sanctions relief, weeks of centrifuge time. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly 3 things. First, why this specific threshold is fundamentally different from every previous Iranian nuclear advance, and why the international community's standard response toolkit no longer applies. Second, how a technical development inside a mountain in Iran translates directly into oil prices, shipping insurance rates, food costs, and the economic outlook for countries that most people have never connected to this conflict. Third, what the 3 scenarios are that strategic planners are actually gaming right now, including the one that no government will say out loud, but every serious analyst is modeling. Stay with me, because what comes next is not a repeat of the last 20 years. The architecture of this crisis is genuinely new. To understand what just happened, you have to go back to November 2011. That was the month the IAEA released a report, unprecedented in its directness, concluding that Iran had conducted activities relevant to the development of a nuclear device. Not ambiguous dual-use research. Activities relevant to a device. The international community responded with what it knew how to do. Escalating sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and the implicit threat of military force held just far enough over the table to compel negotiation without triggering war. That architecture, pressure, negotiation, partial concession, repeat, produced the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in July 2015. The JCPOA was a genuine diplomatic achievement, and it is worth being precise about what it actually did. It capped Iran's uranium enrichment at 67% purity. It reduced Iran's stockpile of low-enriched uranium to 300 kilograms. It converted the Fordo facility from an enrichment site to a research center. It installed continuous IAEA monitoring. In exchange, Iran received sanctions relief worth an estimated $100 billion in unfrozen assets and renewed access to international banking. What the JCPOA did not do, and this matters enormously now, is permanently eliminate Iran's enrichment infrastructure. The centrifuges remained. The knowledge remained. The physical capacity remained, mothballed but intact, like a factory floor with the power switched off but the machinery still on the floor. Then came May 2018. The United States unilaterally withdrew from the JCPOA. The Trump administration reimposed sanctions, then escalated them under a policy it called maximum pressure. Iranian oil exports, which had recovered to 5 million barrels per day following the JCPOA, collapsed back toward 400,000 barrels per day. Iran's GDP contracted by 6% in 2018 and a further 8% in 2019. The currency lost roughly 60% of its value against the dollar. Iran's strategic response was methodical, not reactive. Beginning in May 2019, Iran announced it would incrementally exceed JCPOA limits, calibrating each step as a negotiating signal. Enrichment crept from 67% to 5%, then to 20%, then to 60%. Each step was framed publicly as reversible leverage building, a message that the economic pressure had a cost. The Western diplomatic community largely processed each step through that lens as a negotiating position, not a destination. That interpretive framework is now broken. Here is what changed. On January 4, 2020, a United States airstrike near Baghdad International Airport killed IRGC Quds Force Commander Qasem Soleimani. That event, whatever one's view of its strategic merit, fundamentally altered the internal politics of the Iranian nuclear program. The faction within Iran's leadership that had argued nuclear restraint was a tool for sanctions relief lost influence. The faction that had long argued that only a credible deterrent guarantee could protect the Islamic Republic's survival gained it. The assassination of a sitting head of state in Iraq, conducted without warning, made a specific argument inside Iranian strategic circles that without nuclear deterrence, no Iranian leader was safe. That argument has been winning internally for 5 years. What we are now seeing is its operational consequence. The Biden administration attempted to resurrect JCPOA negotiations beginning in 2021. Talks in Vienna came within weeks of a final text in 2022, then collapsed over Iran's demand that the IRGC be removed from the U.S. Foreign Terrorist Organization list, a demand the Biden White House concluded it could not absorb politically. Since then, there have been no formal negotiations. There have been channel communications, through Oman, through Qatar, but no structured framework. And in that diplomatic vacuum, Iran's centrifuges did not pause. They ran continuously, accumulating material at a rate that IAEA reports documented with increasing alarm and decreasing diplomatic consequence. The chain of events from 2011 to today is not a mystery. It is a documented sequence of decisions, each rational from the perspective of the actor who made it, producing a collective outcome that every party in the chain would have said they were trying to prevent. That is the most dangerous kind of strategic failure, not malice. Miscalculation compounding over a decade. Let us now examine exactly what Iran has done technically and why it matters in ways that go beyond the obvious headline number. Uranium enrichment is a process of increasing the concentration of uranium-235, the fissile isotope, relative to the more abundant uranium-238. Natural uranium contains approximately 7% U-235. The JCPOA limit of 3. 67% is sufficient for civilian nuclear power. 20% is the threshold typically defined as highly enriched uranium by the IAEA. 90% is weapons grade. Iran is now at 84%. Here is something that no arms control analyst had seen before in modern history outside of the original nuclear weapon states: a non-weapon state accumulating material at 84% purity under active IAEA monitoring, while simultaneously announcing that the enrichment was a sovereign technical exercise. Iran has not expelled IAEA inspectors. It has not withdrawn from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It has enriched to the edge of weapons grade while maintaining the formal legal structure of a peaceful program. That is an unprecedented combination, and it has paralyzed the conventional international response architecture because that architecture was designed to address either a transparent program or a clandestine one. Iran has constructed a third category. The system doing this work matters. Iran's most advanced centrifuge, the IR-6, can enrich uranium roughly 10 times faster than the IR-1 models that were the primary focus of early JCPOA negotiations. Iran now operates approximately 3,000 IR-6 centrifuges at Fordo alone, according to the IAEA's most recent quarterly report. The total number of advanced centrifuges across Fordo and Natanz is estimated at over 8,700 machines. This is not a symbolic program. This is industrial-scale infrastructure. The Fordo site presents a specific military problem that strategic analysts have been discussing for years, and that is now acutely relevant. Fordo is buried under approximately 80 meters of rock. The United States' most powerful conventional bunker buster, the massive ordnance penetrator, the GBU-57 weighing 30,000 pounds, can penetrate roughly 60 meters of earth before detonating. Fordo exceeds that depth by 20 meters. Israel's current munitions inventory does not include the GBU-57, which is a B-2 Spirit bomber payload and has never been transferred to Israel. What this means in practical terms: there is currently no confirmed conventional military option that can guarantee destruction of the Fordo enrichment infrastructure. Military strategists are not saying this is impossible. They are saying the margin of confidence has narrowed to a point where planning assumptions have to change. Compare this to 1981, when Israel destroyed Iraq's Osirak reactor in a daylight airstrike, a facility that was above ground, undefended by modern air defense and not yet operational. Or 2007, when Israel destroyed a suspected Syrian nuclear site at Deir ez-Zor in a strike that the Syrian government initially declined to acknowledge. In both cases, the facilities were targetable with high confidence. Fordo, at operational depth, with S-300 air defense batteries with dispersed enrichment activities that have reportedly begun at additional sites, the targeting problem is categorically different. The Iran that existed before Fordo was fully operational is not coming back, and the military options that existed in 2012 are not the military options that exist in 2025. What military strategists are actually discussing privately, based on think tank publications and retired official commentary, is a combination of options: sustained cyber operations targeting centrifuge control systems, a capability the United States and Israel demonstrated with the Stuxnet operation, which destroyed roughly 1,000 IR-1 centrifuges between 2009 and 2010. targeted strikes on above-ground associated infrastructure including power supplies, cooling systems, and the above-ground facilities at Natanz, and covert action targeting the human infrastructure of the program. Iran is aware of all three options: its dispersal of enrichment activities across multiple sites, its hardening of electrical and communications infrastructure at nuclear facilities, and its documented counterintelligence purges following the assassination of nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh in November 2020. All of these represent direct countermeasures to options that were previously on the Western planning table. That threshold has now been crossed. The military options have not disappeared, but their cost, their reliability, and their strategic consequences have all shifted in ways that change the calculus fundamentally. This is not abstract geopolitics. This is a direct line from the centrifuges at Fordow to the price of fuel in your city, the cost of shipping the goods on your shelves and the food on your table. And I want to walk you through exactly how that transmission works. The immediate market reaction was visible within hours of the IAEA's classified briefing being partially disclosed through diplomatic channels. Brent crude oil rose from $74 per barrel to $83 per barrel in a single session, an 11% move that triggered automatic circuit breaker pauses on derivatives exchanges in London and Chicago. That kind of single-session volatility in crude has historically preceded either a sustained rally or a sharp reversal, depending on whether the underlying disruption is realized or contained. The options market is currently pricing a 34% probability of Brent reaching $100 per barrel within 90 days. That number was 8% 3 weeks ago. The transmission mechanism from Iranian nuclear escalation to oil prices operates through two channels, and it is important to understand both. The first is the Strait of Hormuz. Approximately 21 million barrels of oil pass through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. That represents roughly 21% of global oil consumption. Iran has repeatedly demonstrated, through naval exercises, through the 2019 seizure of the British tanker Stena Impero, and through the documented mining of vessels in the Gulf of Oman, that it has the capability to significantly disrupt Hormuz transit without physically closing the strait. Even a 10% reduction in Hormuz throughput, achievable through elevated insurance costs, rerouting, and slowdowns, would remove more oil from the market than any OPEC production adjustment in the last decade. The second channel is war risk insurance. Lloyd's of London and the international marine insurance market set war risk premiums based on assessed threat levels in defined geographic zones. The Joint War Committee, which sets those zones, elevated the entire Persian Gulf to high-risk status following the 2019 tanker incidents. If that designation is expanded or if premiums move to reflect active conflict probability, the cost of insuring a single tanker voyage through the Gulf increases from roughly $500,000 to potentially $2 million or more. That cost is borne by the cargo owner, transmitted to the refiner, transmitted to the fuel distributor, and ultimately priced into what you pay at the pump. This is not a futures abstraction. This is a per-gallon arithmetic. The downstream industries affected are broader than most people track. Aviation fuel, which is a direct derivative of crude, represents approximately 25 to 30% of airline operating costs. A sustained $20 per barrel increase in crude translates, with some lag, to airfare increases of roughly 8 to 12% on routes over 5,000 miles. Petrochemical feedstocks, the basis for plastics, fertilizers, and pharmaceuticals, follow crude with a 30 to 60-day delay. Nitrogen fertilizer, which is produced from natural gas, is particularly exposed to any Iranian action affecting Gulf gas supplies, which flow primarily through Qatar. Qatar supplies approximately 22% of global liquefied natural gas. If Qatari LNG exports face disruption, not certain but priced into risk scenarios, nitrogen fertilizer prices, which had already recovered to $320 per metric ton following post-Ukraine highs, could reapproach the $900 levels seen in mid-2022. The countries most exposed are the ones that hold the thinnest crude import reserves and source the highest proportion of their oil from the Persian Gulf.